Hi dear audience, hope you would be fine. In this short video we would be discussing about lecturership, the syllabus. Actually a lot of my students are going to appear in the recently exam of the lecturership, which is going to be held very soon in the next month as well. So there is a disparity between the books which are available in the market and the syllabus, which usually comes into that of exam. Actually, they have a vast some sort of data bank. Punjab Public Service Commission has a vast data bank, due to which books are not as much focused as might be the extensive range of the data available to the data bank of the Punjab Public Service Commission. Therefore, students remain unable to attempt or cover all the subjects. For example, one deficiency which I find in the books available in the market is that they are particularly focused with the syllabus of PMS CSS, which is defined one in the papers of English literature in the CSS and PMS. So, for example, if Thomas Hardy is in the syllabus of CSS English literature, then the books available in the market are only focused with the Thomas Hardy, then with Charles Dickens, and then with Shakespeare. So they miss a lot of the things which might be the need or the demand of Punjab Public Service Commission with reference to that of the test of the lecturership. So just if you are going to appear in that test, take the divisions, means prepare yourself on the following lines. For example, you must be familiar with major literary terms. So usually from 5 to 10 or 3 to 7 points they usually ask of the literary terms. So I just take the point that 10% of the whole paper would be about the literary terms. They might be there would be 4 options and you have to attempt one of that. So it might be what does it mean, or there might be a line from which you have to point out the literary devices. So for that of literary devices you are required or consult a good book of the literary terms. For that I would be recommending the literary terms, the dictionary of literary terms by Martin Gray. So get that book and mark the important literary, means students just is not supposed to be knowing about the metaphor and the simile, as there are a lot of literary devices and significantly a lot of number of the literary devices are used in the genre of the literature. So definitely you have to be very much familiar with those of the literary terms. And then literary movements, usually they 10% ask the question about the literary movements. For example, French Revolution, almost I have seen that a lot of my students are very much poor in their knowledge of the literary movements. For example, literary movements in American literature, they don't know anything. And similarly, except that theory of Wordsworth and Romanticism, our students are very lacking in the study of the literary movement. So, for example, our students particularly, they know very little about that movement of symbolism. They know very less about that movement of this aestheticism, art for life's sake, art for life's sake, art for art's sake, and that Puritan movement as well. So they have very much less knowledge about the movements. For that I would recommend the book of the Literary Forms and Movements by New Kitab Mahal. That is a very good book. So you should also have been studying that as well. Then, for example, if you are going to be a lecturer or the professor, then poetry is a significant genre which covers our literature, English literature. So for that, you must be familiar with the major significant poets of the English literature as well. For example, take the poets from the beginning of the English literature to the end. For example, if you are talking about that of Chaucer age, then you must be very much familiar about the Chaucer as a poet. And then if you are in a Shakespearean age, then you should have been familiar with the other significant important poets of the Shakespearean age. For example, that of the that poet's poet. Who is that poet's poet? Uh, you should be familiar with that. You should be familiar with the Rape of the Lock. You should be familiar with that Paradise Lost. You should be familiar with that of William Wordsworth, then other Lake District poets as well. And then you should be familiar with the Thomas Hardy as a poet. And later on, you should have been very much familiar with Robert Browning, Tennyson, and then T.S. Eliot, and then recently the modern poet as well. So a significant, likely 10% of the whole paper contains of the information about the poets and the poetry and the poets. Means it might be something about the date of birth of a poet. It might be about the association of a poet with particular movement, or it might be about the some famous work of a poet. So you should have make a list of important poets, their date of birth, and their important works as well. Then comes the drama. Drama is also the very significant genre of our literature. So you should have to make a list of the dramatists, and then their movements and their influence as well, and the kings and queens during which they were writing. For example, in drama we have just significantly 3 or 4 important movements. For example, Shakespearean drama, you should have been very good with that Shakespearean drama, and Christopher Marlowe also includes in that era. And then drama was flourished in the 19th century, with the revival of the T.S. Eliot, then Waiting for Godot. You should have to be very much familiar with that of the modern trends in the drama as well. So drama is very rich in history, but short in number of the dramatists as well. After Shakespeare, you may just Ibsen and that one T.S. Eliot, and then you might come to that G.B. Shah, and then to that of Samuel Beckett, and some important. So you must have been familiar with these names as well, in its deeper sense as well. Then novel and novelist. For example, you should have to be familiar with that of the history of the novel, when the novel began, that of the Henry Fielding as well, and then later on Thomas Hardy as a novelist, then Charles Dickens as a novelist, and then you can proceed to the novelist as well, Thomas Hardy, Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, H.G. Wells, and then that of the Jane Austen, Virginia Woolf, from the lady novelist. You can consult these, and then the Lady of the Million, George Eliot, Million the Floss, and then to the modern novelist as well you can focus. So then comes the prose writers. So you should have to be very much focused about the prose of the age as well. Different ages, as prose has to be written in different ages, so accordingly you have to focus on the prose writers as well. Means their date of birth of the prose writers, their significant works as well, And then comes the short story writers. For example, when the short story developed, what are the different techniques of the short story, and some important masterpieces of the short story by different. For example, Ernest Hemingway is a good short story writer. Alexander Allan Poe is the good short story writer. And then from the Indian context, you can take the good short story writer as well. So you should have been very much good in the short story as well. And then comes the criticism. You should there are some questions about criticism, for example, movements as well. You should be knowing about that, preface to Shakespeare, Johnson, and then poetics as well, Aristotle as well, then this in defense of poesy as well, Sidney, and then Wordsworth, Coleridge. Then you should have to be familiar with the criticism of this T.S. Eliot as well. And then you should be very much familiar with the modern criticism as well: structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, feminism, eco-criticism. All these are stylistics, post-colonial criticism. These might be having a good section of the question in your lecturership exam. And then you should have to be very much familiar with that of the history of English literature as well. As you know, such papers cover a significant portion from the history of English literature. History is considered as the backbone of English literature. So 10 to 20% or 15% questions comprises on that of the history of English literature. And then the post-colonial or the postmodern literature are the very much recent in English literature. It means contemporary literature. For example, you should have been very much familiar with the name of Homi K. Bhabha. And if you are going to from Pakistan, then you should have to be very much familiar with the Pakistani English writer. A lot of students complain that in this paper they have very much focused to the Indian literature or the African literature. It's not that focusing on the Indian literature or that of the African literature or the Pakistani literature. Means this comes in under the category of the contemporary fiction, contemporary literature. So 10% or the 15% they focus on the contemporary literature as well. So from history to the present and from different genres, they ask the question with proportion. So if you are going to appear for your lecturer exam, then you should have to divide and equalize your study in these following categories. With this, goodbye. Thank you.